So while working on the next chapter, I actually realized that the code is a complete mess and it's time to actually clean it up a little bit. So this video will be one of those boring refactoring / cleanup videos. So you might want to skip that, but maybe it's interesting for you how I approach it. So yeah, one thing that I already committed and pushed is this small change, like that one that I talked about, that I wanted to have an SDL assert function that in case the condition is not okay, just prints the SDL getter, and I use that for all the SDL functions. So this is what I did off stream basically. Then another one that I realized that on non-Windows platforms, actually this process start does not inherit the stdio. I'm not sure if it's a bug or not, but to fix it, basically you just explicitly provide the std in, out, and error, the pipes from the OS package, so like this. So this is another change. And the third one that I made here is basically for SDL logging. I have a special context with a logger that does not show the file path, the line, and procedure name in it, because it's always the same, right? It's this procedure that we have here, so it does make sense to have this noise here. So this is what I did. Now I want to proceed basically with much more refactoring, because it's already 500 lines in this main, and if we want to do more stuff, it's gonna be a bit painful. So my idea is to split it into different files, maybe do some conceptual splits and stuff like that, so it has a better shape and some resemblance of some kind of architecture, I guess. So the first thing I would like to do is actually have a very clear notion of global state, and instead of a bunch of global variables, I would like to have an explicit structure that is defined as a global state structure, and just have a single global variable of that structure type. So let's basically do exactly that. For now, let's just start with wrapping all this stuff into a structure. So something like globals, that would be a structure of this, right? Now all this needs a comma after it. I should probably learn Vim macros, but yeah. And for some reason the formatter doesn't really like the nested anonymous structure, but this is fine. This default context is something that I don't think we need, actually. I don't think it's really used. Yeah, this SDL log context, it's only used as in one place, so maybe we could remove it as well and just have it scoped locally. Maybe, if you don't know, Odin has another way to actually declare a global variables that are scoped into some function, and this is very similar to C, which is basically just static SDL log context, and that would be runtime context. So we assign to it as well. Now basically we have all these errors for all the variables that were global before. So let's just declare one global variable of the type globals and just start fixing it. So let's open our diagnostics and just go here. So window will become a G window, right? GPU is GGPU, the same here, G window and GGPU, right? Then the window size, well, we have the window and the win size. Maybe we should also rename this to like window size or something to be a bit better, right? So of course G window, that would be G window size. Maybe I will speed up for the video, we'll see. This is GGPU, right? Now this depth texture format is probably something that we also want to have in, that's another global variable basically. So is basically here, that would be SDL GPU texture format, right? And while we are at it, maybe it makes sense to actually cache the swap chain texture format. So swap chain texture format, that would be another GPU texture format. Let's keep going. So the depth texture will be of course G depth texture, and yes, this depth texture format. Let's go again. So we need this default value D16 new norm vector initialization here. Let's say that depth texture format here is the 16U norm, but then we will of course try to set it, right? Now this is G, this is now G window, G window, it's all the same. Camera, that is part of the game. Let's go to the next diagnostic. So the same here, G window, G GPU. So the swap chain format is something that we now have as a G swap chain texture format, thankfully. We will use it in multiple places. So setting up pipeline is of course G GPU, that is a G pipeline, and G GPU of course. This one is yet another instance of G swap chain texture format that is now cached. That is G depth texture format, and this is just the same, G GPU, G sampler. What else? Yeah, basically all the access to G GPU. Maybe I should have used find and replace, but I like to actually control exactly what I do. So G GPU. Now this G key down, it's fine, like this. G mouse move. Now look is also G. So just like this. And I forgot to change it here. Don't forget to add it here. G camera. Let's see. Win size, that will be of course G win size, but it not just win, but window. G mouse move. G key down, G mouse move, G window. All of this is the same, G camera, G depth texture, G pipeline, G sampler. So now it doesn't work, and let's see why. So we do have the globals. Yeah, I don't think we actually specify this, so this is an invalid format. I think if we actually see the output, you see that the target format is invalid because I completely forgot to do this. So let's do this where we initialize stuff. So basically here, after the setting the swap chain parameters, we of course just specify G swap chain texture format is the one that we were calling. SDL GPU swap chain format, get GPU swap chain format for the GPU for the window, right? Let's see if we are using this anymore. GPU swap chain texture format. Now this is the only usage, so let's run it, and now that still works, so this is pretty nice. Let's maybe commit it already. Let's call it part 12 refactoring explicit global state, something like this, right? Now this would be the first thing to do. Then I don't like how this looks like, so maybe we should move this proc into a separate function and actually handle the different levels properly, because I don't like that we have debug here and then like we have info here, so this is not pretty. Let's just copy that, replace this with something like SDL log, right? That would be this thing, right? And how do we pass the log context now? Well, we have the user data, right, which would be a pointer to the context. So what we could do is basically transmute it to a pointer of runtime context, right? And then just dereference it like this and have it like this. And now we can simply pass SDL log here and then the pointer to our static variable SDL log context. So this should still work, but now I want to basically remove this priority here and just use different log functions depending on the priority, right? So this is what I'm gonna do. And actually I will not use different log functions, I will use different log levels. So we can say log f, and that, you see, it takes a level. So let's say level. So we don't need this anymore. We just have a category and a message. So that should be much cleaner. Let's see, level, that would be log.level. And now we simply switch on priority. And there are a bunch of priorities and not all of them map to the Odin logger, but we will do as best as we can. So we say case, and there's a lot of them. Invalid is fine, that will be just debug. Trace can also be debug. Then verbose, I guess it's also a debug case, and then the actual debug, that will say level is debug. Then we say that there's a case of information that maps directly to info, case of warning maps directly to warn, of course, to warning. Then we have error, which maps nicely to error, and finally we have critical, which is just fatal. So that should output some nicer log messages. Yeah, just a small thing that I thought I could do as well. Let's just commit this. So that would be better SDL logging, something like this. Now our main file is still pretty huge, right? It's still a lot. It's even longer than we had before, but let's try just splitting that stuff. And I'm already seeing that this load shader is very isolated, and actually it doesn't change that much, right? It's just some logic that loads a file, creates a shader, loads some reflection data, and just passes it to the create GPU shader function. So this is something that I think we can already even extract into a separate file. Let's do that. So let's say shader Odin or something like that, right? And then we just paste it here. That needs a package. Let's see, that needs all the imports that we have here. So that would be, well, not all of them, right? It needs at least the SDL. I see it needs the file path. It needs some logging. What else? It needs a string concatenation. It needs OS to read the files, of course. And it needs the JSON, and I think that's the only place where we are using JSON, so let's just cut it from there and paste it here. And it's a bit better now, right? We have a shorter main file, but it's still 400 lines, so let's keep going. Maybe just commit this already. Extract shader loading into separate file. Now another part that I can see in this file is that we mix the initialization of SDL itself and all the very basic things like logging or creation of the window, or even the basic structure of the main loop, including like temp allocator freeing and polling some basic events, rendering ImGUI, and all this stuff that we don't really care about in the game. And we mix that together with game-specific stuff like rotation, changing colors, updating camera. So maybe we should actually split that in two parts. So we would have like our main kind of entry point, framework thingy, and the game modules. So let's actually start doing that. Let's add a file like game.odin. And well, let's see. We probably want to have something like game init to initialize some game specific stuff, like for example camera is pretty much game specific. Then we would like to have probably game update. That would take data time. And finally we would have a game render function. And let's see what does it need. So for rendering, basically we do all this stuff which renders our objects, and then we do another pass of imGUI, right, that is rendered in a separate render pass, which is fine, we can leave it here, but all this stuff is totally game specific, right? So basically we want to pass the command buffer and the target swap chain texture into this game render function and call it from here. So let's say command buffer is of course our SDL GPU command buffer, and I don't have completion, of course, because, well, I don't have the import. And we have the swap chain texture that we acquired, right? So swap chain texture, that is just a pointer to SDL GPU texture. So let's cut this out and move here. And let's call it here game render. That would be command buffer and the swap chain texture. And while we are at it, this imDraw data actually we can add another if statement to not even do all this stuff if there's nothing to draw from imGUI. And how to check that? That would be imDraw data, and basically if imDraw data display size, we only want to draw if the display size of x is greater than 1 and display size y is greater than 1. Only then we want to draw all this stuff. So there's this, and let's see what it needs. So the clear color is something that currently is defined here, but actually it's our global state. So basically it should be here. And what I'm thinking now is that probably we should move, we should have some kind of shared or common module that would contain all the global definitions and whatnot. So let's maybe do that. Common.Odin. I'm pretty sure that will of course need the SDL. And let's see, this content dir and globals can probably go here. Now this basic vector structures and the white color can also go here. This SDL assert function might be useful. Can also go here. That of course needs the logging, so import log. What else? These are definitely game related, as well as this stuff. This is totally game related because this is very specific to how we do things. Just move it here. Now again, yeah, for the clear color, let's get back to that. So let's say clear color, that is SDL F color, if you remember, right? And here we should initialize this in our game init function, so probably we should do it here. So after init, that would be our game init. And let's take a look at the init. What do we do here? So we initialize the SDL, we create the window, GPU, claim the device, set some basic swap chain parameters, cache the texture format, get the window size, set up the depth texture, and then we also set up the camera, which is totally game specific, so let's move it here as well. And then we need the imGUI. And you know what? I think this function should be called something like init SDL. Now we can say init SDL, init imGUI, and then game init. Now the setup pipeline, the pipeline is definitely how the game wants to render stuff, so that should be also moved here. So that's part of the game rendering. and it should be called somewhere here, setup pipeline. Now let's see. This is part of the game update, I would say. So now this needs the mGUI, but not the actual mGUI implementation stuff, so this is nice. Clear color is of course a global. Clear color equals, and use it here. The rotate and rotation are that as well, so all this stuff should be moved somewhere here, while rotation speed should be here, as it's a constant, and we can actually make it a constant. Now we need an enalc for that, so let's use it. Now this will complain that it's not a compile time constant because this is a function call, but we can actually avoid that by just using a multiplication that will be evaluated at compile time, and we can simply multiply by deg per rad, I think, so to convert from degrees to radians. Now let's see, this rotate and rotation are actually also part of the global state. So that makes me think that probably we should also have kind of two global states, maybe. One for the platform stuff, so like this application stuff, and one for the game stuff. But let's think about this later. Maybe move those closer to the... yeah, something like this. Now, rotate is a boolean, and rotation, if I remember, that is just an angle, right? Just a float. So, yeah, that will be just a global variable now. Same stuff here, rotation, clear color is here. Now this UBO, I believe it's here. Well, this structure is totally game related because it's specific to our rendering pipeline, so this may be something that could be placed next to the vertex data. Now this matrix type is probably something worth defining as a properly named type, so something like mat4. Let's define it next to our vectors. So mat4, that would be our matrix. So now we can use it here, mat4. Right, back to this UBO. So it's here, and we have the view mat and model mat, and all this stuff is definitely part of the game. So let's move it here. Now that needs a rotation, so that would be G rotation. And the projection matrix, let's see. Well, we were defining it outside of the main function, but I think it makes sense to actually just do this on rendering. Well, because in a real project, basically the FOV can be changed by some animation or whatever, so, and it shouldn't be too bad to actually just calculate at every frame. So let's yoink it and put it here next to all the matrices like this, right? Now we have the model, which can be also part of the global state, I guess, for now. So that would be our model. And this is, of course, part of the setup function, part of the init function, I'm sorry. So that would be this. And by the way, I forgot to remove the setup pipeline here, so let's take another look. This update camera is definitely part of the game. Just paste it somewhere here. Let's see, we initialize SDL, we initialize mGUI. Then we have a main loop, which clears the tempo locator. This seems to be kind of platform specific. And some basic input handling. Let's keep it like this for now, I would say. There's nothing too game specific about it, like the game can actually use this key down and mouse move, so that's fine. Then we have mGUI new frame handling, then we have the rendering, swap chain, acquiring, but actually I forgot to do the game update and pass the data time here, so this is important, of course. Then we try to render the MGUI, we get the draw data, and then if the swap chain is there, we try to render the game to that swap chain using the command buffer that we have here. And finally, on top of that, if there's something to draw for MGUI, we draw it. So that seems okay. Let's see if that compiles, and it doesn't. Of course, because I forgot to import stuff, so let's go. Let's take this, put it before. Of course, I have the model, which now should be G model, right? Let's take a look. Yeah, that seems to be working still. Oh wow, we messed something up. Yeah, I think this should be actually RAD per deck. Yes, and another thing is that, well, this 0 we can remove, but this can be, of course, not a local variable rotate, but actual global state, so something like this. So now it's rotating. We restore the functionality. So this seems to be good for now. Let's take another look at what we have in our main file. So SDL login and initialization are fine. MGUI initialization seem to be fine. Now this load model stuff, well, that should totally be part of the game, or at least not part of the main module. So let's move it here to the game for now. Let's take another look at the main function. So we initialize the SDL, we initialize MGUI, we initialize the game. Then we calculate the delta time, we do some bookkeeping, we process the events. I guess at some point we will want to have some game event processing function, but let's get there later. When we process MGUI, we update the game, and then we render the game. So that seems much cleaner actually. Let's take another look at what we have to do. Well, we need the file path, right? And I don't think we need it in main anymore, so we put it here. We need the STBI and strings, right? So STBI is something also only used for loading the texture. Strings is here as well. And finally the mem is also only used for uploading the buffers. So let's see. The game still works just fine. Everything seems to be working, and the program seems to be splitted into a bit better structure. That makes a little bit more sense. So in the game file we can only care about the actual game specific rendering and updating, and stuff in the main file maybe we will not touch that often, so that is also good. Hopefully it will be just easier to keep in your brain. So that is another step. Let's commit it. I guess that would be extract game and common stuff into separate files. Well, now our game file is actually also quite large, and it mixes the game behavior and some asset loading, which is something that I would like to also maybe separate.